welcome to the Poppy Shorts tutorial. So this is the lovely pair of shorts we're going to be making today. So the very first thing I'm going to do is sellotape our pattern pages together. And then I'm just pinning our patterns to our fabric and cutting them out.
So right here we have the two back pieces of our poppy shorts. And what I'm going to do now is just get the two good sides of our fabric and place them on top of each other. Just line them up nice and evenly. And then I'm going to pin from the top here all the way along
to the end of the inner crotch.
So just make sure they're lined up nice and evenly. And then I'm going to pin all the way down here and then just sew all the way from top to bottom here. So just pinning and then sewing. And we are leaving this section here open. And a 1 centimeter seam allowance is normal. Now I'm just going to do the very same thing now to our two front short pieces. This is how it looks like from
the front.
And I'm going to do the very same to our two front pieces. So I'm just going to make sure that the two good sides of fabric are facing each other like so. And then I'm going to pin from here to here. Yeah. So we're just going to do the very same here and sew along exactly where we've pinned. Now, so what I'm going to do now with both seams is I'm going to press them open with my iron just to make sure that there's a nice crisp finish, and then I'm going to overlock both seams. So I'm just going to press this open with my iron, so the same for the front and back, and then I'll overlock these and then we will sew our front and back pieces together and add our waistband. Now, so the very next thing we're going to do is place our front and back pieces on top of each other with the good side facing each other and the bad sides on the outside. Then what we're going to do is line them up and we're going to pin them in place along the side, either side, and in the middle. So we'll just start here at the very side. So we just want to make sure that they're lined up evenly and pin all the way down, and then as normal we will sew everywhere that we've pinned. This is a really super easy beginner piece and it still looks very good on nice comfy pair of summer shorts. And you can totally add pockets if you'd like. I just prefer them to be less bulky, so I don't like to add pockets just in terms of the way that they look when they're on you. When you have pockets they can just look a little bit bulky at the sides. So just for this pair, I'm not going to do any pockets. That's one side, and we're going to do the very same to this side. And then we're going to take the middle section of our shorts and we're going to line up our two seams here from the front and back to make sure that they're perfectly even. Just line them up, and then we're going to pin these in place so that they are going to match nicely. So we're just going to pin everywhere that, or we're just going to sew everywhere that we have pinned. Now I'm just going to iron open our seams either side, and then I'll just overlock them, and then we will start on our waistband. So that is all of our seams overlocked, and what we're going to do now is our waistband. Okay, so for our waistband you can basically measure your own elastic yourself in terms of how tight or loose you'd like it to be. My elastic is about 26 inches for the waist, and that's probably a size small, and that just allows for as well for about centimetre seam allowance as well, because we'll have to sew this together here. So the very next step is then you have turn your shorts inside out, and then what you want to do is take your elastic and fold over the top of your shorts, and you want to make sure that there's enough room for the elastic to be able to fit through the waistband. So what I'm going to do is just fold it over, so measuring the width of the waistband, and then 1 centimeter extra to allow for seam allowance here at the bottom. So I'm just going to pull it down that little bit more. So about 1 centimeter seam allowance all the way around, and then the width of our waistband. Oh, the width of your elastic. This elastic is quite thick. Your elastic might be shorter, so you can just measure it to suit your type of elastic. So yeah, just 1 centimeter up for seam allowance and then over your waistband. And I'm just going to pin this in place and then use this as a measure for the whole waistband. And at the very end, we will slide our elastic through, but we'll just pin our waistband in place first. And then, since this is a stripy fabric, you're going to want to make sure that your waistband lines up nicely and that the stripes are in line with each other. So now we have our whole waistband pinned in place with enough width to fit our elastic through. So what I'm going to do now is just sew exactly where we've pinned, leaving a gap so that we can later add our elastic through. So we just want the gap to be wide enough to be able to feed through this elastic, and we'll just attach a pin to this and feed it through the shorts at the end. But we'll just sew everything in place for the minute, and we've made our waistband wide enough to fit our elastic through. So yeah, with enough room for seam allowance. And we've also lined up our waistband so that all of our stripes are in line and the fabric fits nicely. So I'm just going to sew everything here in place, leaving a small gap for our elastic. Okay, so I've just left this little section of our waistband open for us to add in our elastic. So I've just attached a safety pin to the top of our elastic here, and what I'm going to do now is just funnel it through our waistband and drag it all the way around. So then, once we feed it out of that little gap that we made, we need to sew our 2 pieces of elastic together here. So I'm going to sew them like this so that they'll be perfectly even when we pull it all the way through. So I'm literally just going to place our elastic pieces like this, and I'm going to do a couple of back stitches just to make sure it's nice and secure. Then I'm just going to make sure our elastic is spread nice and evenly across the waistband, and then we will sew over that little gap that we made. You just want to make sure that our waistband is nice and straight inside. So now I'm just going to sew closed this little gap that we made for our elastic. Now, so that is the lovely waistband of our shorts all finished. So they turned out very nice, front and the back there. And the very last thing is we're going to do is just hem the bottom of our shorts. So depending on how short or long you want them, you can kind of adjust your hem length. I'm still going to do just about 1 centimeter hem, so I'm just going to turn them inside out and then roll them up and then up twice. So just like so. And same thing again with our waistband, we just want to make sure that our stripes line up nice and evenly, and then I'm going to pin all the way along. And then the very same for this side. Once and then twice. Now, so our shorts are now all pinned, ready to be hemmed. So I'm just going to sew exactly where we have pinned so far. So all the way around. That's one side of our shorts hemmed lovely and neatly. We're going to do the very same to this side now. Now, so here we have both legs hemmed and our shorts are completely finished. So I think they turned out gorgeous. I love the stripe and I think they're super pretty. Perfect pair of summer shorts.